We're looking at a very tight situation between the police and pro-Palestinian protesters who continue to rally in Chicago, calling for an end to the war in Gaza. Thursday's rally coincided with the just concluded Democratic National Convention. Thousands of protesters marched with Palestinian flags and various banners. Protests focusing on the Israel-Hamas conflict have been taking place this week, with the demonstrators demanding that the Biden-Harris administration put an end to the war. And staying with the demonstrations, dozens of people have rallied in Johannesburg to call on the South African government to ban coal exports to Israel as fighting continues for the 10th month in Gaza. Demonstrators dancing and singing held Palestinian flags, banners and signs reading Glencore coal fuels apartheid and genocide, no to fueling Israel's war machine, and no fuel for genocide, energy embargo now. The demonstration comes after Colombia banned coal exports to Israel on Thursday in response to concerns regarding the utilization of coal in weaponry against Palestinian territories. The decree was signed by the Colombian president, as well as foreign affairs, finance, mines and trade ministers 5 days prior to its effective date, which is August 22.
Our own government of national unity, so-called, still allows Glencore to send South African coal to Israel. What does it do there? It feeds the genocide.
Think about the electricity grid in the Zionist state. Think about the illegal settlements and how they power and expand those settlements. Think about the military machine. That must take a hell of a lot of energy. So if we can stop the coal sales from here, if Colombia, the biggest exporter, has already stopped those coal sales, we can really play a part in stopping the genocide, in crippling the Israeli Zionist state.
Comrades, effective today, the 22nd of August, is the effective date of Colombia stopping all coal exports. They announced it in June, but they issued a directive last week, signed by all of the ministries, specifically the Ministry of Economic Affairs.
I am here because I believe in the freedom of the Palestinian people, and I'm very much against South Africa contributing to the genocide of Palestinian people in any form or shape. I think still having economic ties while being politically in line with Palestine doesn't make sense, and I think our government needs to do more in terms of cutting economic ties with Israel in all forms: energy, weaponry, barbed wire. I heard a South African company builds barbed wire for Israel, so I just think on an economic front our country can do.
Meanwhile, the United Nations Security Council has held an emergency meeting in New York on the situation in Gaza. Officials reiterated a call for a ceasefire, putting pressure on Israel and Hamas to reach a deal and also ensure the release of all remaining hostages, indicating that a truce is needed now more than ever to stop further escalation. On the humanitarian catastrophe, the United Nations Agency for Palestinian Refugees, UNRWA, says it'll begin vaccinating children in Gaza at the end of the month after health officials confirmed a polio outbreak in the besieged strip.
A ceasefire and hostage release deal in Gaza is imperative now for regional peace and security. I have continued to emphasize that message in support of regional de-escalation in discussions with all relevant parties and member states in the region, including Lebanon, Egypt and Qatar.
There is now a confirmed polio outbreak in Gaza. The first confirmed case, a 10-month-old baby in Deir el-Balah, is an individual tragedy. and at the same time a sign of a larger looming catastrophe. Polio is a highly infectious virus and can infect anyone at any age. However, those most at risk are children under 5. For every 200 children who become infected, one will suffer irreversible paralysis. Polio is easily prevented by a safe and effective vaccine.
Colleagues, Secretary Blinken just concluded his 9th visit to the region since Hamas attacked Israel on October 7th and unleashed a war that has caused so much suffering and devastation. The Secretary reaffirmed the United States' ironclad support for Israel's security, but he also aimed to advance discussions on a comprehensive ceasefire and hostage release deal that now is in sight, and to emphasize that no one in the region should take any action that would undermine ongoing negotiations.
Gaza does not need more paralysis and death. First by bombs and bullets, now combined with occupation-sponsored famine and disease. Gaza has witnessed life destroyed. It needs life to be restored, and it needs it right now. We fully support the proposal of the Secretary General for an urgent vaccination campaign to stop the spread of this disease. Any obstruction of this effort will serve as further proof of Israel's genocidal intent and actions against our people. The Secretary General said the end of this month, along with humanitarian organizations in the medical field, to begin this campaign. Are we going to be supporting him in implementing the vaccination campaign and the ceasefire that he is calling for
their statement? We did not ask for this war. We are neither intentionally killing civilians nor overseeing a famine. There is no famine in Gaza. Since the start of the war, Israel has facilitated more than 14,000 trucks carrying aid, including over 700,000 tons of food. We also continue to work with our partners addressing the medical needs in Gaza. Between December 23 and January 24, enough polio vaccines for over 2 million Gazans were delivered, partnering with WHO and UNICEF.
And on the front line, Israel's military says it has carried out an airstrike on a Hamas command center in the Gaza district of Zaytun. According to the Israeli Defense Forces, IDF, the facility was located within a building that previously served as a school. The IDF accused Hamas of storing weapons there. The military did not note any casualties from the strike, but Israel has intensified its attacks across Gaza over the past 48 hours. Heavy clashes have been reported between the Israeli army and Hamas, as well as the Palestinian Islamic Jihad in the northern part of the Strip. At least 18 Palestinians have been killed in the central and southern areas of Gaza since the renewed attacks began this morning. The VOA's Amy Gutman joins us now from Tel Aviv. Amy, good to have you join us again today. Israel has intensified its attacks across Gaza, the latest being the IDF's airstrike on a Hamas command center in Gaza, a school compound, we are told. What more do we know as regards the details of this military operation?
The IDF during this operation discovered near a school complex, and I should additionally say where there were bags marked with UNRWA all over them. They discovered a huge weapons cache with explosives and vests and intelligence documents, all the property of Hamas. And so they obviously destroyed this. They also intensified their airstrikes, taking out 30 different targets. Now, there are two different reasons for these intensified strikes recently. One of them is, of course, to continue to try to erode the capabilities of Hamas to launch attacks. But the second is more important, I would say, and quite relevant these days, which is to continue to apply military pressure on Yahya Sinwar, the leader of Hamas, the belief being that only through military pressure and might and really destroying these capabilities can they inch him towards a deal. The U.S. has so far, and other mediators have so far been relatively unsuccessful in applying any kind of pressure or leveraging anything over Yahya Sinwar. So this is sort of a dual purpose, these intensified strikes.
And we're back to the ceasefire talks. You just said it seems no one is able to get through to the two sides. The talks being mediated by the U.S., Egypt, and Qatar. U.S. Secretary of State, during his 9th trip to the Middle East, said Israel had accepted the U.S. ceasefire proposal. And many wonder what the update is from the Hamas side as regards the negotiations.
That's very true. In fact, I heard something of it sort of lighthearted going around here in Israel, which is, if only Israel had to make the deal with the U.S., the deal would be done, because both sides are in agreement. But of course, it is Hamas that is believed to be holding up the deal at this point. There is some good news today that came out of the talks in Cairo yesterday, and that is that there may be some opening up by Sinwar in terms of the terms of the deal relating to the Philadelphia corridor. Now, that is the corridor along the Egypt-Gaza border. And we're hearing that Hamas has indicated that that Sinwar has indicated that he may be more open to an international authority patrolling, monitoring, and governing that border. And that is relatively new. Of course, there are a lot more deal points to get through and to compromise on. So this is only one of several contentious points, but it does indicate some willingness, and it's a starting point. We're hearing conflicting things, as always, about Sinwar's position. On the one hand, we're hearing that he's quite happy to hold out. No one can leverage anything against him. He's happy in his bunker and feels very safe. And additionally, that he feels as long as we're inching closer towards World War III and a big regional war, this is his ultimate goal. So he's happy to sit back and let everybody do the fighting for him and see the region go up in flames. On the other hand, we're also hearing that he feels that his battalions are weakening, which we know to be the case. And again, this is the purpose of a lot of the intensified attacks by the IDF. And that he feels he needs a deal because he can't continue fighting with the same intensity. So it's really anybody's guess. It's kind of more of the same at this point with just a few different parameters. But we also do know that the Qatari prime minister is headed to Iran to discuss the status of the deal. So who knows what kind of influence that could have.
Right, and the U.S., elections are up soon, the presidential elections. All eyes are on who wins that all-important elections between the Democrats and the Republicans. The Democratic Party held its national convention yesterday. Among the highlights of the U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris' speech, of course, was Gaza. She says she and President Biden were working around the clock to end Israel's war. We also saw dozens of pro-Palestine protesters rally at the convention in Chicago. Do many Israelis have confidence in her words?
Yeah, I just want to correct one thing, because you mentioned it's Israel's war. I don't think most people here see it as Israel's war. I think most people see it as the war started by Hamas that has created this war. So I just want to make sure we're correct on that, because there's been so much misreporting about this. So in terms of Kamala Harris's statements at the DNC, look, this was something that has been needed for a long time now. She needed to clarify her position. She's been very ambiguous on several policy points, not just related to foreign policy in the Middle East, but a lot of different areas. She hasn't taken any official interviews. So there's been a groundswell of demand for her to make her policies clear. And of course, the DNC is exactly the place to do that. So this makes total sense that she would come out with a crystal clear policy stance on Israel and support for Israel and its defense of itself, its security, and of course, the hope that we can get to a deal sometime soon, that we'll see the hostages released, and of course, greater security in Israel and also Palestine, and stop the war from carrying on in Palestine as well, in Gaza as well. So this was something that she's been pushed to do. I think it was also very important because, forget about the Israelis for a moment, because obviously most of them cannot vote in the American elections, but the American Jewish voters and pro-Israeli voters have been very anxious about her stance, believing that she was going to pander a bit too far to the left of the party and to the pro-Palestinian voters. We even saw a report out yesterday, a poll demonstrated, in fact, that there were more Jewish American voters this time around, this election, who were going to vote for Trump than last time. So this demonstrates exactly that there was some anxiety and nervousness about who are you voting for and what does that mean for Israel's security. Now, the other interesting thing to note here is that other analysts have broken it down and said, look, very simply, the pro-Israel vote and pro-Israel donations are worth well more than the pro-Palestinian ones, simply because they don't tend to make donations in as great a size, and they don't tend to turn out to vote in as great a number. So I think this was something that a lot of people were waiting to see and hear, and I think it only strengthens her campaign.
And the Israeli Defense Forces has released more than 40 Gazan prisoners amid allegations of abuse. Palestinian authorities have said Israeli authorities continue to use torture and humiliation against the detainees. But the Israeli Prison Service claimed it was unaware of these allegations of torture. What's right and wrong at this time?
Yeah, this is something that has gotten very big play in the news here. Israel takes these allegations and all allegations of criminality, even against its own troops, never mind prison service, very, very seriously. It's always had a strong arm of justice that acts very independently. And so these allegations of torture and abuse were thoroughly investigated here. I was watching it very closely to see the outcome. And after a thorough and expedited, they really got in very quickly to find out what was going on and whether there was any legitimacy to these claims. They had medical examiners, you name it, go in and conduct investigations. And they concluded that, in fact, the allegations were false. So there was a real feeling here that not only was it a shame that these allegations were made and they were found to be false, but more importantly, they didn't do Israel any favors on the global stage, because, of course, it's not a great look. The optics are not great. Whether it's false or not, the headline is out there. We're talking about it. So I think there's been a lot of concern about people who are making noise about claims that aren't true, and how very damaging and how far-reaching that damage can actually be. I should mention that 120 low-risk detainees who were detained in Gaza and imprisoned in Israel were released in the last week. This is something Israel does regularly once they've had a chance to interview and interrogate these detainees, and they can establish that there is either low or no risk. They do release them back to where they came from, back to where they live, either in Gaza or elsewhere. So this is routine.
Right. Amy, thanks again for that update.
Thank you.